Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1 of Wu Assassins. A great season. Obviously, before I really get into everything, I'm going to start off with a non-spoiler review, just kind of giving you like my general thoughts about this season. Like I said, I thought it was great. If you're looking for something very like action-packed, this is the perfect show for you, but it's just not just straight like action. There is this like ever-growing and evolving story. It does a very good job kind of setting up a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, you're like very interested to see like, okay, where did this go? Like, it's interesting because it's something I immediately thought like after the first episode, I'm like, this got some Avatar: The Last Airbender elements to it. And then I heard someone else make the same thing. I'm like, I'm glad I'm not the only one who got picked up on that. I almost feel bad because I think anytime I see anything with elementals, like elemental powers in it, I'm automatically like, oh yeah, I think martial arts meets elementals makes me automatically go just to Avatar, just that Avatar: The Last Airbender, well, slash Korra, Legend of Korra as well. But it's interesting that that's immediately where my mind goes. But yeah, I mean that's kind of all you really need. Like that's the gist of everything. But like there were some interesting turns in the story I wasn't kind of expecting, like routes that they went down. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. So if you're looking for something very like actiony, martial arts, you know, with a cool story, then like Wu Assassins is right up your alley. I don't want to give too much away just because, you know, I want to save all that for spoilers. So if you have not seen Wu Assassins, I highly recommend you check it out, especially if you're looking for something in the more martial arts side of things. Going forward, I will be going into spoilers, so if you've not seen all of Wu Assassins, don't listen to this because I'm going to be talking about things, and not everything in any particular order, so I'm going to be all over the place. So once again, spoilers, you have been warned. Okay, so a lot of interesting things to kind of pull back from this whole situation. First of all, I like the whole situation with Kai in the sense that, you know, he is kind of like, hey, I'm a chef and everything, but for him, it's that whole thing. Like, it's kind of interesting, and I like that kind of like direction his character goes. And the fact is that initially he doesn't want to kill people. He's super against it. Yin Yang is like, no, you kind of have to. It's part of the job of being a Wu assassin. I guess there's no room to be a pacifist Wu assassin. Well, not pacifist, but just not straight up murdering people Wu assassin. But that's a level of things that there's up to a point where Kai kind of has to, he tries his best to avoid it, but eventually it comes to the point where like he has no choice to do it. And it seems, interestingly enough, the moment he does that, he doesn't do it a whole bunch later, but there's a couple more kills that pop. Like obviously, I'm all over the place. After he killed Baxter, he started dropping bodies a little bit more. Not like a shit ton, but I think that shows volumes of like, the thing is like, obviously, it was something Six had told him. It's like, you know, once you kill someone, it's going to change you forever. And I think that's sadly the route that Kai might potentially go down. Like, I think, obviously, what it does to him, making him think, like, maybe, he doesn't want to be a killer, but I think it might be a situation, you know, sadly, it might be a thing of, like, once you start, it's hard to come back from it because maybe it becomes too easy. But like I said, there are instances of him not straight going for the kill when he could have. He disarmed some people, some accidental deaths and stuff like that, especially in that fight, which was pretty badass between like when him and Lu Jin are fighting those guys, like, and it's cutting back and forth between their fights. Like that situation is like there was some accidental deaths in that, but obviously there was situations where Kai straight up snapped people's necks. But still, you know. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting progression for his character, and I'm curious to see like what that can mean for him going forward. It's really interesting. I think that's an element that's kind of shared amongst the four friends between him, Tommy, Lu Jin, and Jenny, and that's kind of a big thing about this is like when it's all said and done, none of them are going to walk away from this situation the same person that they were. Tommy, you know, because he spent most of his life as being a screw up. He got blamed for the fire that gave Lu Jin his like scars and everything, and it was just that was kind of like. That's where things kind of started rolling and spiraling out from there because he just spent his entire life, whether it be because of his parents and just this whole, you know, situation with the fire, it just compounded upon itself and he just kept making more and more mistakes. I mean, he has a good heart in the grand scheme of things. Like the fact of the matter is, when he's trying to help out that lady later on, Alana, like with her abusive boyfriend, I was like, are you about to pull the trigger? But I guess because luckily the dude slammed on brakes and the gun dropped and went off. So it could have went ugly because it's like interesting because like so far the only two who haven't killed anyone amongst that group is Jenny and Tommy, and maybe that's something they're going to probably potentially try and strive to keep that element to it. And even Jenny, because Jenny's whole situation is she's supposed to, well, she's lived her entire life as, trying to be perfect. I think that's, and I think that's kind of a neat, because obviously it's like her struggling with like, because obviously it's not just like her particular family. That's something I think obviously is a big thing in the Asian culture. And to begin with, that a lot of, kids kind of have to struggle with that, because it's like a lot of that Asian culture is built on kind of being like, the top of your game essentially. And it's like the whole thing with the restaurant, which was her parents. And obviously, I did like that moment where Tommy was there for her and kind of stuck up for her. It's like the fact of the matter is this place is only running the way it is because of Jenny, and like because her parents are so judgmental about everything, like every little thing. Like her dad was nitpicky about every little thing that was wrong with the restaurant, this and that. But it's like it's striving, is doing well, but it wasn't good enough, And Jenny kind of felt that pressure to always be perfect, because she even had that whole conversation with Zahn. Zahn was like, I've been with the triad since I was little. I've done everything. I've sacrificed everything for them. And it's like, oh, do you think just because you were an orphan child that your life was that your life was worse off than mine? It's like having, parents that love me and, have made sure I was taken care of and well looked after has its downfalls as well because of that situation. They have such high expectations for her. And it's like, you can never live up to those expectations. You end up kind of almost drowning because of those expectations. So that was an interesting side of her situation. Even to the point like she borrowed money from the triad to kind of compensate for that, because she's remodeling a restaurant, trying to make it bigger and better, trying to basically get her parents off her back, but to kind of pay back the money. We see a lot of it, but you see bits of it. The fact is she gets into fights, like, paid fights, so that she can make money to pay them back, because the last thing she wants to do is basically owe the triad money. And the reason why she never, because the conversation came up, because like Lucian's like, why didn't you come to me? It's like, wherever I end up in this situation, I want it to be like, I'd be the only one to suffer the consequences. That basically, because it's so interesting too, like the way Lou kind of figured it out too. He was like, you basically want to be in a situation that even if you're not able to pay back, the triad will own the restaurant, and you're fine with it because it's like, oh, well, it's out of my hands. And you kind of, that was her way of potentially breaking free. I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of sad that you have to go about a roundabout way to kind of live your own life to a certain extent like that. I was like, that's sad. Then you have Lu Jin kind of running his criminal thing. But it's interesting to see, like, he is kind of this, I like what they're doing with his character, whereas he's kind of trapped between being a bad guy, borderline just straight up criminal, yet having his hero moments, especially throughout the season, like that there is a budding hero within him. So I just thought that was kind of a neat element. Obviously the whole CG thing, her kind of get, I am curious, like, whether that story she told Kai was BS about her dad, getting busted. And the fact of the matter is why she doesn't play loud music. I was like, because she was like, oh yeah, why don't play music? It's because her dad got busted because he was playing loud music. And what, he does, he kind of basically taught her what she knows about breaking into cars and stuff like that. And I guess maybe because her dad being who he was, maybe that's why she went into law enforcement. But I'm curious, like, the whole thing of like, yeah, that's why I don't play loud. I wonder, was that just BS to get Kai to lower his guard, or was that actually like a true story in that regard? I don't know. The whole aspect of change is kind of interesting too, because that plays a big role in a lot of things, whether it be something like Uncle Six's whole situation. I don't think I would have ever guessed that he was going to be the Firewall until it gets revealed that he was a Firewall. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Just because I just thought, like, I didn't know where we were going to take this direction, because I wasn't sure what to really expect, because I don't remember, like, I'm sure maybe the trailer showed him being the Firewall, but maybe I just didn't remember. It's been a while since I'd seen the trailers. I don't know. Regardless, I just thought it was kind of, a fascinating situation, because I thought maybe it's like, oh, we're setting him to just be like a regular crime boss, with the triad. Even the whole Alex situation, how that twist ended up being like, now, because his twist really got me. It's like, oh, you're a part of all this. It's like, oh, in fact, you actually used to be a Wu Wu assassin, but then like he became the Wood Wu, and I was like, oh, that's so fat. Like how his story, because his story was about basically being the Wu assassin. You have to make sacrifices, even sacrificing your own family, kind of for the greater good. He tried to protect his family while also doing his duties as a Wu assassin, and it cost him his family. And the Water Wu at the time ended up killing his wife and son, so he wanted to bring them back. But even with his powers as a Wu assassin, he couldn't do it. So what he does is he ended up killing the Earth Wu, the Wood Wu, and he ends up what he ends up doing is killing himself so that the Tao, that makes him the Wu assassin would leave him, and then the Wood Wu would immediately possess him, and he tries to use it to bring his family back. Well, not just sad, tragically ironic, his attempt to bring his family back actually kept him away from his family for like 500 years because he basically has immortality. And I like that they immediately asked that, because like Six is like, oh, so does that mean I'm a live forever? It's like, no, that's a property that belongs only to the Wood Wu, because the Wood Wu constantly heals. So it makes sense. Yeah, I guess it kind of works kind of in the same way like Wolverine's healing kind of keeps him from aging, I think, to a certain extent. And that kind of how the whole situation works with Logan. Like, I think it does. Maybe I'm completely full of shit on that regard. Regardless, I just thought it was kind of an interesting element. So that's why I was like, wow, like these two like kind of main antagonists end up being not just like crime bosses, but also like part of this whole. I mean, I guess of course they would, but if anything, you would kind of almost expect like, oh, maybe they get these powers later on. Not the fact is that they automatically had it, like, because it seems like Six has had his powers for a long time. He's had them for like 15 years, because that's when when he originally came and killed all those other like top ranking like triad people. So there's that. But circling back to Six, it is kind of interesting that he has a very complicated relationship he does with Kai. It's like, yeah, you're my son, but then it's a whole thing of like, oh, now I find out you're the Wu assassin who's meant to kill me. And the fact is, you can tell, like, because even from the beginning, he didn't want to handle things that way, because it's like, he wanted to talk to Kai, because it's like, even upon finding out Kai was the Wu assassin and finding out what Alec was up to, he didn't want to go down that route, because he knew Alec would potentially want to kill the Wu assassin. That kind of, obviously he has kind of almost borderline world domination thing going on. Wasn't even really world domination to a certain extent. He wanted to get what he was going to get, but he's like, hey, if you help me get what I want, I can basically help you. It's like, oh, it's so much bigger than Chinatown. Can you imagine owning China itself? It's that type of world domination type of thing. But obviously it's kind of interesting, because it's so, like I said, it's sad, because it's like, at the end of the day, all he's trying to do is bring back his family. That's what it is. All this death and destruction is all a means to an end. For him, it's like, it doesn't matter, because all that matters is getting my family back, so everything else can just fall to the wayside, But getting back to like Six, like the whole fact is that, the way he always protected Kai. Like, we even saw it in the flashback, like the head of the triad at that time wanted Kai to be able to put a bullet in a traitor, but Six took the gun and bam, 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 killed the dude just so Kai wouldn't have to. He's telling him to keep his hands clean. Basically, he wanted him to kind of not be a part of this world, which is so interesting, considering the fact is you're the main head of this world, yet you're kind of dragging your son. Like, he's not really dragging Kai in it. He does keep Kai distant from it, but like the stuff he's offering Kai is kind of pulling from that world, because the money, the blood money essentially he gets from that world is kind of what he was planning on giving Kai for his own restaurant and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of interesting when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. But like I said, the fact is, his approach to everything, even though finding out, oh, Kai was trying to poison him, which I think that speaks volumes about how Kai handled the whole situation. The fact of the matter is, it's like, I can't bring myself to kill Six myself the direct way, so it's like, I'll poison him. But it's like, the moment he knew that Kai was the Wu assassin, it's like, no, I'm not stupid. You're gonna have to try harder than that. But for him, it's like, in an attempt to find some peaceful way around this, he allowed Kai to find a means to remove the Fire Wu from him, which that whole experience was interesting. Like the whole what was it like? Basically, is it basically a poison from animals? It basically involves, blood from the people who've been touched by the Fire Wu, and each of the animals kind of battle it out one to one, and then they eat each other. It seems like it's a very slow, lengthy process, and it seems like it takes its toll on people. In particular, it took its toll on 6 when it was done to him, and just like the goo like was just veins turning black. He looked like he was just suffering some seriously messed up crap was happening on the inside. So, but the fact is that that's so interesting, because you would think someone like 6, who holds so dearly his power, the fact is he would be willing to give it up. I mean, granted, I think it's one of those things, and 6 kind of talks about it himself. He sees the bigger picture where everyone else can't, you know? I mean, that ends up playing a huge that ends up being the biggest, like, plot point for him and Zan, which I didn't see that twist coming. I thought it was kind of interesting, because at first I was like, oh, because she refers to him as big brother. I was like, oh, that's your sister. But then it's like, oh no, she means that in kind of like the old gang related thing, kind of like in like, I mean, maybe this is just an anime thing, but people like in a gang or whatever will refer to like their leader, their boss, as Aniki, kind of like big brother / boss type of situation. So I think this is kind of like the same equivalency. I wonder if that just, I mean, or maybe it's just because I guess maybe she did kind of look, I mean, I think it's that combined with like the whole, oh yeah, big brother. It's so interesting because she was like, oh, when it's all said and done, maybe I could be the big sister. And he's like, yeah, there's no room for a big sister. Like, the fact of the matter is, even when I'm gone, there's just going to be someone else back here in the back, but you'll always be there in the front driving, essentially. He kind of shit on her ambitions to kind of run a triad, basically being like, you're always going to be in a position that you're always in right now. Things will never change. Obviously, things did change, because Zan works with Alec to be like, yo, she wants power. And so she ends up running a triad and everything. So I did think it was kind of messed up. It's like, oh, you know, it's like they're about to fight and everything, and she just shoots him in the leg. I'm like, I kind of laughed a little bit. I was like, I didn't see that coming. I kind of halfway expected that, but it still kind of caught me by surprise. Sally, you know, she ends up torturing and killing him because for her, it's like more so than anything, it's because it's like, oh, you'll suffer by your choices. But he's like, oh, said by someone who has no vision whatsoever. I think it's supposed to be a thing of like, basically she's very short-sighted. She's focused on right here and right now, not seeing what's, you know, doesn't see the domino effect that might roll out, where it's like 6 is like, I've been doing this thing for a while longer than you. I see the bigger picture. I'm willing to not work with Alec because I know the ramifications will come about because of this, but you are so fixated on getting power, what you believe you deserve, what you want, that you're not willing. Because even, like I said, 6 is willing to give up his power, which, like I said, I wouldn't think he would, but because he sees how much of a threat Alec is, and he can't let the fire woo fall in his hand, so it's like, we gotta, you know, screw him over to a certain point. Jenny becoming, because I love this, because I didn't even, like, you know, I thought it was kind of interesting, like, you know, because obviously Kai has his visions about everyone. I'm curious about the whole Tommy one. Well, because Tommy's was him killing himself with like a shotgun. Is that something that still potentially could come down the pipeline, or was it kind of like, because it wasn't like a literal thing. I mean, sometimes in some cases it was. The Lu Jin one was completely literal. He was covered in blood, but it seemed like it was on a different side though. Like in the vision, it was on his right side, right? Wasn't it? And I think in everything it was on the left side, and there was like the Russian dolls, and it's like, oh, it represented the 3 Russians that ended up getting killed, and CG was there during a fight between Kai and Uncle 6, but luckily she didn't get burned. That seems like that sucks, because I guess that explains why it spread so fast on, you know, Lu Jin, because it's like that fire spreads. The moment it touches you, it burns you up. But Lu, I guess, was lucky enough that like maybe Uncle 6 got there enough to kind of pull the fire back, because the fire kind of has a life of its own. So it's kind of like you let it free and it'll grab onto someone and just burn them alive. It almost seems instantaneous. But I guess because this was kind of like byproduct fire, it wasn't the direct fire itself. So it was like, that's why but because I guess it has some semblance of living, that's why it crawled up Lu Jin so quickly and kind of burned him, you know. So regardless, it was just kind of interesting. I was halfway expecting Zan to end up with a woo, but she turns out not to be the case. I mean, to be fair, Jenny ended up taking it, which I guess because I wasn't sure what that meant. Like, I saw her with a piece. I think in my head, when it's like, oh, when Kai first has his vision, I was like, oh, is she going to end up getting the Tao? That's what I thought it was, but I didn't realize, like, oh no, what it was showing was her with the fire woo. That's why he was telling her not to touch it, because in particular he saw the vision, you know. So I did almost forget, like, right, they did have to kind of dispose of those bodies too. So that was something like CG had to help out Lu Jin as well as Tommy. So it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of one of those gray area things of like, yeah, especially for CG, considering the fact that she's a cop and everything, that she kind of had to do that. That's pretty rough. I think one of my favorite episodes this season, I think it was episode 8, isn't it? Is like that way, just the way it's structured. It starts off with Zen going into the police station, and then you kind of slowly like reveal like everything else, like, you know, what happened with Tommy, and then with Jenny, and it's kind of all stacked upon itself like that. It's like, oh, this and that, and like the reveals, like the metal woo. Which is interesting because like the only woos we really got to find out how they became the way they did is like we found out how Six got the fire woo. It was the day he was disposing of that body he killed so that Kai wouldn't have to do it. I mean, it's kind of interesting. That turn of events led to him becoming the fire woo. I guess you could probably say like if things played out differently, it might have been Kai who ended up getting that body. I mean, getting, you know, he probably would have been told to dispose of the body himself, maybe. So I'm thinking that maybe he could have potentially ended up with the fire woo back then. Maybe not. You know, it just maybe there's some grand scheme, some destiny in all of this. But obviously, like I said, we know how Alec got the Woodwoo, but we never really, well, because we also know Baxter too. Now that was interesting because it seems like with Baxter's case, it seems like a family thing. Like the Woo would pass down, like basically he'd capture people because his son wasn't good enough. So for him, it's like, no, I'm gonna capture people, basically, because he is someone who's all about saving the world, the earth in particular. I guess that's why it resonates. I guess maybe because they had, like, maybe the first person who got possessed by the Earth Woo in their family was someone who automatically felt like that, and that sentiment was something that automatically passed down. So it's like, oh, my son is worthy of this because he's all about saving the earth and everything. So it's kind of interesting. It comes with like this specific burden to the point his son is like, oh, my son's kind of worthless, which we never saw his son. The fact of the matter is, it's like, so he would kidnap strangers and determine whether they were worthy or not. And as we can see, what was the girl he had captured? I'm blanking on her name. It's so sad, but the fact is, like, we see that when he captures people, and if you don't live up to his expectation, he turns you to stone. It kind of goes borderline like Medusa turning you to stone. Sad thing is, the girl, just as she's leaving and she's falling and turns to stone, she sees her boyfriend who was turned to stone broken to pieces. I was wondering if Kai got there and defeated him, would that return to, but I guess it's like, once you turn to stone, you turn to stone. Or maybe there's a very morbid thing they didn't show you, but like, yeah, those people did return to human flesh. It was just they were in the broken pieces. Like when we saw her, she wasn't, but that doesn't mean that Baxter didn't go back later on and smash her. So it's interesting because like recently, because that actor was recently in, you know, the TV show Swamp Thing, so it's just interesting to kind of see him in this. I should also point out too, is like, yeah, the actor who plays I'm terrible. Lu Jin is Louis Tan. Freaking guy is from Into the Badlands. I'm like, yo. Also, the actor who plays Tommy, I looked him up. He's Lawrence Coe. I'm like, I know him from some. I don't remember what it was. The same thing for the actress who plays CG, Catherine Winnick. I remember, right? Bones. It's a deep cut. When everyone came back in season 6 after like everyone went their separate ways at the end of season 5 with the Smithsonian, I'm going into deep cut, so I do apologize if you're unfamiliar with Bones. This won't mean nothing to you. But CG played Hannah. She was the woman that Booth was dating in season 6. That's why I was like, because I kept looking like, where do I recognize her from? I feel like there was other stuff in her filmography that I would recognize her from, but that one kind of stood out for me. I was like, oh, right, because that was like so many years ago. Like I said, that was like season 6. So regardless, that, like I said, that was like deep cut to kind of pull reference from, but nevertheless. But kind of going back to it, I love the whole Gideon thing of how the meta woo works, where it's like, because like this is a conversation that I was thinking of myself too, because like, you know, because obviously I made the comparison to this in Avatar, The Last Airbender, and / Legend of Korra. It's so interesting because it depends on the mythology, because certain things pull certain elements. Like the typical elements you'll always see, maybe like fire and water, but then the others always kind of flip-flop. In this case, it's water, wood, and earth, and metal. Like fire, water, earth, wood, and metal. But some cases, it's like, it's lightning. Well, lightning and metal kind of go hand in hand. But the one I often see typically is wind. Or, you know, if you're using Avatar / Legend of Korra, it's wind. I mean, air. Regardless. The fact is, I'm stumbling all over my words. I do apologize. I have a big brain fart right now. I apologize. So it's always interesting what elements they use, and it's also interesting too because as you know, metal bending becomes a thing later on in Avatar. Spoilers if you've never seen Avatar and that kind of spoiled things for you. Sorry, I didn't say who does the metal bending, but nevertheless, it's just kind of interesting to think that. But I like that it is kind of a combination, like how you can use that too, like how it gets used in like. Oh, like Gideon uses it when he's possessing Riley's body, which I'll kind of get to that in a second, to look at the computer, just like you don't even have to hack into things, even to the point, just swipe your hands over a phone and boom, it's like you're able to write a message. Because apparently the way Gideon explained it is basically the body has a lot of metals in it, calcium, iron, zinc, all this other stuff. That's what makes it so like, hey, he can control your body, he controls you through the metals. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. I wasn't sure how that worked because I was like, why is it that the metal woo can do that? And even the whole electricity thing, I guess like maybe, you know, because metal conducts electricity. Because I was wondering how, I was like, because I figured, I was like, we saw the electricity at first. I'm like, who is that? Is that the water? I was like, that can't be the water. It was like the metal, but that doesn't make any sense. But maybe that's the justification for it. Maybe there's even a scientific explanation of being like, oh yeah, like maybe it accesses the, well, to be fair, that, well, because the thing is, it connects with electricity, but maybe there's like metal, I don't know. I'm too stupid to kind of understand the whole situation, but I love that the metal woo has the ability to like possess people's bodies. Now that was interesting, because I was wondering, I was like, do you just shapeshift into them, or do you become them? Because at first, because obviously the whole like back and forth time frame wise, when we saw that Zan had those spiky heels, I was like, oh, totally got to be later on when we got introduced to the metal woo, it's like, oh, you make a good vessel. I was like, oh, he must have like either possessed her body, but I was like, at first I was thinking maybe he just simply shapeshifts, but it's like, no, he possesses different bodies. Like obviously when he possesses your body, you don't die. Like when he jumps from a different body, I am curious whatever happened to Frank, CG's boss / captain, which, oh my God, was that the worst? It's like literally your wife is taking your daughter literally an hour before shit hits the fan at the precinct. I mean, literally her being like, man, like I'm tired of not being able to know whether or not you're going to be okay or not, and worried about you and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, ooh, worst timing for that conversation to come up like that. I even love it when Tommy is in interrogation, and they're like, he's like, really? You're so caught up on this gang stuff? The world is literally about to burn, and you're worried about this gang stuff. You don't even know what's going on. We're talking people with superpowers and stuff like that. You mean like Batman? He's like, actually, Batman doesn't have powers, but more like some Thanos stuff. And I love he literally had a conversation that I normally have. He's like, I know I shouldn't mix up the whole DC and Marvel stuff. I'm like, I love that you even mentioned that, dude. I love it so much. But getting back to it, I am curious, like, whatever did happen to Frank, did they kill him afterwards? Did they let him live? Because that's a lot to kind of have to explain. Like, almost like, I'd say, like, every cop, probably with the exception of Riley, because she got depossessed, but who's to say they didn't kill her afterwards? I don't know. But, so, that was pretty interesting. I also love that whole, like, what was it he called it? He called it the mind something. Essentially, it's like a prison he puts you in when he's possessing, Gideon puts you in when he's possessing your body. I guess the fact is that, it was interesting because it takes on the form of something familiar to you. In CG's case, it was an interrogation room, which I did like her being able to get free, because she's like, oh yeah, like, oh, you bring up all that stuff. It's like, yeah, you kind of don't have full control of me because I'm anemic, which I wasn't really 100% sure what the term anemic mean, but it's like, it can mean a multitude of things, but it can also mean like an iron deficiency, which means like, obviously there's less stuff in her body, like metallic stuff in her body for him to have control over her. So that's what kind of let her be, at the very least, be able to fight back a little bit. She still has enough in her body for him to control, but it was at such a lower state, it kind of gave her an opportunity to kind of fight back. I also love when the Water Woo, played by Summer Glau, which was pretty badass, ends up kissing CG, and I love, like, Tommy's over there bleeding out, and he looks at them making out, and he looks away, and he looks back like, what the hell is going on right now? I thought that was kind of interesting. I actually kind of feel bad for the Water Woo, because she ends up losing Gideon, because Gideon gets his neck snapped. poetically by CG, because it's like, yeah, kind of almost payback for possessing my body, which the last time we see her is in the path where she's, like I said, I'm all over the place, but I do apologize. I was wondering, it was never going to happen just because because the Wu aren't necessarily evil. It's about how you use them that really determines, but they are an evil in themselves. I guess they kind of tug at the evil in people, but if you go, I wonder, could you use, because part of me was wondering, like, you don't think they're going to do a thing where like CG, Tommy, Jenny, and Lu Jin get to keep, the whole like Wu thing, and Kai gets, maybe he replaces the Dao with the Wu, or maybe, he stays the Wu assassin. It becomes this whole complicated thing of like, he's the Wu assassin, but his pals, his friends, his allies are Wus too, and they help him fight. I thought maybe something like that, but it's like, no, they kind of all have to go back, so of course it wouldn't be like that. I just thought for an instance, like, oh, that'd be pretty dope, especially because I'm like, yo, are you about, I was like, because at first I was wondering if he was going to give it to Lu Jin, but it's like he gave it to Tommy. I was like, yo, but it's like that was kind of short-lived. Damn, Tommy, you didn't even get to enjoy it, dude. That's a shame, because the moment that goes down, it's like, oh yeah, the gateway opens and they all lose the Wu, and God, I'm blanking so hard during this recording. I'm so sorry. The Dao from within Kai. It's actually kind of interesting. Like, I thought that was such an interesting element, how they utilize that. And I guess it's not necessary anymore. Well, because obviously, like, the Dao includes all the 1,000 monks that have existed, all the previous people who had become the Wu assassin, and basically all their experiences and their faces are there for you to use. Like in this particular case, the face he uses the most is the monk that's played by Mark Dacascos, which, dude, he's been in a multitude of things. The Crow, the TV show. I feel like what's the most recent thing I saw him? I feel like, I think, I haven't seen it, but I know he's in John Wick 3, so that's pretty dope. But he's also, I feel like prior to that, TV show-wise, be Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that was like season 3, so that was like a while ago. So I think that was like the last thing I remember seeing him in TV show-wise. I'm sure he's done a lot of other things, but those are the things that kind of click in my head the most. So, there was also a Jet Li movie he was in. I can't remember. Was it Romeo Must Die? I think that might have been Cradle to the Grave that he was in. I want to say it was Cradle to the Grave. Maybe? I don't remember. Regardless, like I said, I'm all over the place. But I thought it was such an interesting element of like, you put on their face to kind of hide your identity as a Wu assassin. I was like, that's actually pretty neat. I mean, sadly, it kind of didn't work out well for a lot of people, because Tommy, when he was working with Six, was kidnapping a whole bunch of people who were bald, older chefs. So that kind of sucked. But it's an element I didn't even think about. I was like, right, that completely disappears from the story. Because I mean, it's like no point in covering your face, because literally Six and everyone else already knows that you're the Wu assassin. I probably have to say one of my favorite fights is probably the fight between Six and Kai earlier in the season, just because it's just like, it's full blown like, yeah, action packed fight, but also like superpowers involved as well. Another one I liked was the whole Jenny versus Zan thing. I wanted her to beat Zan, but Zan kind of beat her ass bad, dude. It was bloody, but you got to appreciate the fact that Jenny kept getting up. She kept getting in some good blows. It's kind of the same thing between Kai and Six. Like, Kai was handling on its own to a certain extent, but it's like Six still had the upper hand. I guess he was a better fighter. Also, like that scene at that restaurant and stuff like that. It's like that lady being like, oh, should I bring you some like, chicken thing or something? It's plenty of rice. It's like, no, we're good, And she's like, oh, you don't have to be so rude. And he basically gives her a rundown. It's like, Asians, history here in America. Basically, in the long run of things, it's like basically because my family, like because we've been here for so long, it's like I'm just as American as you. So sausage and eggs it's fine enough. And then she tells those dudes, they start shit. They have to be the assholes. It's like, oh yeah, do the stereotypical thing. Asian men, small penis joke. Okay, and rightfully so, you get your asses kicked. Which is actually pretty dope to see Kai and Six kind of join forces like that. To be fair, Six got his ass kicked pretty bad, just because it's like, yeah, he wasn't at full strength at the time. So, but I love the woman's being like, oh, I've never met anyone so more rude as I love that she's so nonchalant about the destruction and everything that happened in the restaurant. And he's like, yeah, we've never met anyone as rude as you either. So It's like, man, that was just kind of crazy. Kind of tying that in, I do like the whole like Lu Jin and Six situation of like Lu didn't pull the trigger. I was actually worried. I was like, don't do it, Lu. I was like, oh, please don't do it, dude. But for him, it's like, the fact of the matter is he spent so much of his life feeling like a monster. And for him, it's just kind of like, I looked up to you, I respected you, you're the man that saved us. But now I realize that you're the one that left me with this. Because for him, his scars are, you know, they can feel like, you know, like I said, a monster. You know, because I'm sure it just, you know, I'm sure looking at it is just a constant reminder of just kind of what was kind of taken from you. Like the fact of the matter is like the pain that you went through, that burning, you know, that I'm sure probably the countless amounts of surgeries. That's another thing too. That's what kind of made it hard to believe, because like, it's like, no. He actually paid for my surgeries. There's no way he'd be, wait, the asshole who burned me, who made me like this, gave me this condition, is the same one who paid for my surgeries. It's so interesting because it was like, was it him or someone else that had made the reference of the fact is he must have felt so guilty about it, hence why he did it. And, you know, the sad thing is Lu's been so indebted to him his entire life, because like, oh, you saved me. And just to know that the person you felt so indebted to, who you thought was your savior, ended up being the asshole who burned you in the first place. So, but he couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. And it's so interesting because it's like, Kai had made a point that people can change. It's like, no, not him. It's like, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about you. The fact is, like, and you know, like I said, the show kind of shows that where like Lu Jin doesn't have to be the like criminal bad guy. Obviously, he's kind of still tiptoeing in that area even by the end. But it showed that he is capable of being a hero. That there is more to him. That, like I said, he's a complicated character with many different layers to him. What I'm also curious about is that Mr. Young thing when he pops up later on. Because obviously he was like, yeah, Kai's going to have to find a new grocer because Kai was making poison. And he's like, oh, you made an accomplice to it. But I guess he was, because he wanted to make sure, like, oh, is Kai okay? He wanted to make sure if, like, Kai had really gone through with it or not. I think, you know, he was worried about everything. But at the end, when he sees them all kind of together, he's happy because he sees them as little kids again. It's like, despite everything they've been through. But there's also a part of me wondering, is like, is that supposed to mean something else than like there was a part of my brain like, you don't think like Six put some part of himself inside of Mr. Young? I was like, no, that's me just way overthinking things or something. But it just seemed interesting because like when he showed up talking to Jenny, he was acting weird. That's what's like, did he get possessed by the metal woo at that time or something? I was like, what's up? What the hell is up with that? Because he was acting weird. But it's like, no, that was all. I was like, oh, okay. I guess that was just him just actually legitimately just being concerned in the grand scheme of things. So I was like, okay. It is kind of sad in the end, you know, like, despite everything that he sacrificed and done, like, he kind of gets his ultimate goal, but it doesn't work out for Alec because his family at first kind of denies him because obviously you look differently. I mean, it's like, hell, I'm guessing that's kind of a going back in time thing. I don't think that's necessarily, oh, we went to the afterlife. I think it's a portal that basically takes you through time. I mean, because even when the monk had said it himself, that basically time, space, and reality flows through the Tao. So the moment, like, so it makes sense. Like, he did just go back in time, I guess, before they died, maybe. Or maybe it's just kind of like reality was warped. Like he went back in time, but he rewrote reality to make it so in that particular reality, his wife and son were still alive. And obviously they're reluctant to see like, oh, no. Like she sees something in him where he's not the same man anymore, which 500 years of doing detestable things, terrible things just to get his family back. Of course, he wouldn't be the same man that he was. But he convinces him to kind of stay. It's like, it is me. I'm just trying to keep you safe. And then you have, you know, Kai killing him, and the whole thing of like, oh, because like obviously from his family's point of view, it's just like, oh, you killed my husband, you killed my, you know, father just for no reason, and you're going to kill my mom. And all Kai can do is apologize. I mean, he can't even explain the situation of like he was a terrible person, this and that. It's just that thing of just kind of like, I'm sorry. You know, I think he's even apologizing for almost threatening, you know, Margaret's life, you know, because Liam was there begging. And I think when he sees that, he probably puts himself back in his shoes, because Six had talked about the fact is why he adopted Kai in the first place is because the container that they were in, Kai was there with his dad's dead body. He kept saying that line over and over again, and later on Six found out it meant no father. And it's like the boy who kept saying no father over and over again, I wanted to change that and give him a father. That's why he adopted Kai in the first place, you know, which is a beautiful sentiment, which that all kind of ties into the whole sad situation of like, yes, Six and Kai had a very complicated relationship. Even more recently, like even before the show had really started, like they had a very complicated relationship because of who Six was and everything. They weren't always on the best of terms, especially after finding out he was a fire Wu and all the terrible things he had done. But him dying, it shook Kai because, like, no matter what the circumstances may be, he was still your father. Like, he raised you like you were his son. He was always there for you in his own way, even though he wasn't perfect. The fact is, it still hit and hurt to see him die, especially by Zan's hand like that. So. But kind of circling back to that whole Alex situation, I am curious, like, what that means. Like, because we never really get to see how Kai just left. It's like, does that reality disappear now? Does it still kind of exist, but it's a reality that can't be accessed? Like, what happens in that? Like I said, what about the Water Wu? The last time I saw her, she was crying over Gideon's body. But does she leave through the portal that opened up with the others, or what? Because like obviously at the end, obviously this whole situation is still not sitting well with Kai because once again, like killing Alec was one thing of like, yeah, he had to be stopped, but once again, it's like he killed a couple people. It wasn't just like it was a handful of people he killed, but I think Alec's death was sticking to him more. Well, more so than anything, I'm sure looking at the knife was more so reminding him of like, yeah, Six is going. I think I assumed it was more about like, oh, the people I killed with the knife, but it's more so like, oh no, it's more about the fact is that my father isn't around anymore. So, but we do see that despite everything that has happened, that they're making more of a point to be around each other more. Tommy, Jenny, Lujin, and Kai being a family, having that family time together like that. So I thought that was pretty neat. I did like the whole like Lujin and CG situation. Like I said, we never got context on a lot of that stuff, which I'm kind of fine with. Like I'm really curious, but maybe that's something potentially can answer in the future of like, yeah, how did that whole situation get explained? Once again, depends on if her captain was still alive. Like like that precinct situation was pretty messed up. Like how do you handle that? I guess that's a problem for another day. But even like CG's like, yeah, I kind of got to go figure stuff out because everyone's dealing with this thing in their own way. Because even Jenny was making that toast of like, yeah, we'll probably all, within the past 6 weeks, been trying to figure everything out that happened. Probably take another 6 weeks, maybe even 6 months, even 6 years to really kind of finally figure figure this out. Because obviously, like, we're never going to be able to go back to who we were before. And that especially rings true for Kai. But the fact of the matter is all we can do is walk forward. And the fact is she's even saying, like, asking Kai about it because it's like, did you kill Alec? It's like he had to be stopped. Sure, yes, but the reasoning behind you stopping him is what's important. Was it because it was the right thing to do because the Tao was like, you have to do this, you have to stop him? Or was it simply because you were getting revenge for Uncle Six? That's a big distinction. And I think for Kai, it hits him to make him wonder that. You do see Jenny talking to that dude, and then you see Kai looking, because that's what I was always wondering. I was like, is there ever going to be anything between Kai and Jenny? It seems like there might be little hints to it, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know if that was ever a thing in the past or, and because the way he's looking is almost like, I think for him, it's like he wants to keep them separated from his situation. It's like, yeah, we do this whole family thing, but it's like how I'm feeling, that's got to be my burden to bear. I don't think he wants to put that on anyone else, especially Jenny, because especially for him, he's like, he's going to still have to dig into that because him and Lujin are still looking for Zan, I keep bouncing back and forth, sorry, because they know that Zan kind of met with the other higher-ups in the triads to kind of, pay respect. So that's still going to be something. It's like, because you even have Kai being like, tell me when she gets back into town, so that's still an open thread. Like I said, depending on how they handle that whole former Water Wu situation, her whole thing, because obviously she's going to be seeking revenge because it's like, oh, you killed the man that I love, which I'm curious like what that story was, but I guess we'll never know. Because at first I was wondering, really quickly, I was wondering about the Metal Wu. I was wondering if like the Metal Wu was the only self-aware of the Wu. Like, it's like, whereas every other Wu possesses someone's body, the Metal Wolf is like, I'm always the same person, I'm just possessing a different person each time. Like, it's the only one that had a consciousness, but it turns out, it's like, no, it's because the Metal Wu was Gideon, and Gideon literally gets inside of people's bodies, so that was that whole thing, but nevertheless. But going back to it, Lujin and CG, them making out and everything, and also her stealing his car for a second time. I love that. That's kind of nice to kind of bring that back around like that. And then finally we get the ending, which shows Ying Ying showing up. It's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, she's like, I'm here in the flesh. Your job, the Wu assassin is still needed. Everything in the restaurant starts crumbling, and it's like, oh, we're dealing with that ramification, because like the longer that Alec was there, the more of an issue it is. But obviously, like the Wu as well as the Tao itself went back, well, to heaven. So the thing is, like, the question I'm wondering is, did she come back as, oh, is she back to being the Wu assassin? It's like, well, what does that mean for Kai? Is he just going to be a regular dude? Like, or is she going to try to find a way to make him the Wu assassin again? Is she going to try, like, how is that whole situation going to work? Is she just back as a regular person again? Were there other people potentially resurrected? Like, because, like, did she slip out because of everything that went down? Like, when Alec did what he did it open up a pathway for her to find a way out? Did the Tao be like, no, you got to go. You can't just be here in the path anymore. You got to go there. Does the path even exist anymore, you know? Because you would assume without the Tao, like, there'd be no way to kind of really access it, because that's what connects to the, you know, path and everything. So like I said, I'm assuming she's the Wu assassin again, but like I said, what does that mean for Kai or whatever? You know, I mean, I'd be so curious to see like where this would all lead. Like, what would be the next challenge, considering the fact is all the Wu have been taken care of. I guess like an even greater darkness, maybe that was sealed away a long time ago, like something even older and ancient than the Wu. The Wu Jings is back. I have no idea. That was just kind of an interesting cliffhanger. It'd be like, oh, but shit's about to hit the fan, so we're far from done from this. It's like, yeah, you still haven't processed everything you went through, but there's more hell coming your way. At the time we were recording this, it's still unclear whether or not Wu Assassins is coming back for a second season or not. I'm really hopeful that it does, but to be fair, it's literally only been a week at the time we were recording this. This will probably end up going up Sunday, but it's Friday, like, afternoon when I'm recording this, So, yeah, it usually takes some time before, especially Netflix. I mean, there are some occasions where Netflix kind of jumps on stuff immediately, but we'll see. I'm really hopeful to, you know, I'm really interested to see what they end up doing, like, with season 2. Like I said, like, where do you take this? Like, you know, diving deeper into, like, the history of the Wu assassins and stuff like that. Like, that whole aspect of, like, using the faces of the different assassins, like, would that even be an element he would really need anymore? Like, or would we see, like, the monks kind of get free and kind of do their own thing? Like, I mean, Ying Ying is here, so like, what about the others? You know, like, what does that mean for them? Will there be some more superpowered stuff? Will we see a situation where, like I said, this group ends up getting powers? Will we see CG return? Maybe she gets powers. Lu Jin gets powers. Jenny gets power. Tommy gets power, which obviously is going to be interesting considering the fact is Tommy's got, you know, his whole sobriety thing. You know, I'm sure that might play an element in everything going forward too, but I'm so curious to see like where they would potentially take this, because I have no idea. Because I feel like I said, with the exception of like whatever it is that Alec caused by going in there, well, basically he corrupted basically the doubt, like the time and space, the path itself got corrupted is kind of the point. But it's like, what does that mean? Does that mean the monks that were a part of the Tao, maybe they came out and they're like corrupted and they're evil now? Or maybe some other evil was born in that moment? Or like I said, some evil that was sealed away is released? I don't know, because I don't see them doing the whole Wu Jin thing again. Not less if, like I said, like what I thought was going to happen this season with all of them getting like Wus, like maybe that's going to happen in this particular case where it's like, oh, they all get powers because we need these powers to fight. That'd be pretty dope. But like I said, I'd love to see what they ultimately end up doing with a season 2, because I'm sure like the fight choreography in this is already nuts to begin with, but I think it'd probably get even crazier in season 2. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.